Welcome to FinFactor. I'm your host, Blaine Bertsch, co-founder and CEO at Dry Run Cash Flow Forecasting Software, where we help the office of the CFO leave spreadsheets behind, delivering clear and accurate forecasts to the management team. And joining me today is Usman Mahmood, co-founder and CEO of Innovate, a Microsoft Gold partner for Dynamics and an analytics consulting firm specializing in helping businesses harness the power of data science and advanced analytics to drive innovation and accelerate growth. Thanks for joining me, Usman.
Hi, Blaine. Thanks for having me.
I know, like we were sort of talking just the other day about some of the topics that we might dive through. And one of the things that came up that we both got, actually, we started really chatting about, and I said, man, we should actually be recording this, is the idea of data before AI. And so, and how important it is to make sure that your data is structured right, process, everything is in place before you start tackling AI. And so I wanted to bounce that off you.
Blaine, I mean, as you know, this is AI is the new big thing. There are so many tools that are coming out each and every year. Every month we come up with something cool, something exciting that we see out in the market, and companies are scrambling to deploy the next best thing. Quite often when they're not necessarily ready for it, or these are things that they implement and then they see that, okay, how is this going to eventually translate to more dollars, more profit for the company, or how is it going to make my life easier or that of my employees? So just taking a step back, understanding one's business, its challenges, its growth, um, the current tools and technologies that it has in place, and then coming up with a more strategic approach before jumping into AI is, I feel, often missed.
So when I know that like you said, AI is new. It's sort of the I don't want to say flavor of the day because there's an enormous amount of power. So I don't want to phrase it that way because it's yeah, but it is so front of mind for so many businesses today. But I also know it's probably front of mind for all of these businesses is the potential risk. And the potential risk is there's some little areas that they're concerned about. Some of it is probably something that they don't need to be concerned about, but other areas that I can see they need to really think about, and it's the accuracy of the data. And it's basically what we're talking with to some degree is garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah, and you raise a very good point, and I think it's sort of it's important to maybe think about somewhat like a framework, and without there's a bunch of frameworks out there. I don't want to go into those, but there's one that I came across many years ago. It was one by Dell, which was about a data maturity model. And it's quite simple, easy to understand, so I can walk you through it a little bit, and it sort of puts that into perspective of what you're trying to say here within terms of accuracy. So the way it works is it's a four-step process. Organizations, they start off as being data aware, and then they move into data proficiency, data savviness, and then being data driven. Now, I can go into further detail as to what happens in each stage, but even organizations that are sort of data proficient, which means they have some kind of dashboarding, structured representation of their data across the organization, you run into what's known as, single source of truth issues, whereby you'll have several teams spinning out multiple reports, dashboards, and what's funnily known as dashboarding hell, for example. So you're looking at when you're looking at trying to find information, you can get the same type of information across multiple dashboards, and quite often they conflict with one another. So that becomes that creates a whole trust issue. So users do not understand, or they cannot with confidence make any meaningful business decisions or back them up with the right type of data. So understanding where your organization is, whether it's in a small startup, can be data aware in the sense that they may have disparate systems. They may be running an accounting system. They may be running a CRM. They may have a separate payroll. So these are all kind of disparate systems, but then they require a lot of manual kind of integration on a periodic basis. Um, and just to make sense of the data across the organization. So this works for like small startups, but obviously as organizations grow, they need to invest in the right tools and technologies, and the right um, sort of training of their employees as well, in terms of how can we have a single source of repository, especially for critical data of an organization, and then make that available consistently to its users, globally, for example.
Like I talk with CFOs like every day, and it's funny when it's sort of kind of sort of behind closed doors in a meeting. Some of the comments that come out about like, yeah, no, I've been in a room there, and we're trying to get hold of things because no one knew what the hell was going on. You hear things like that, and but it comes down to exactly what you're describing. Is oftentimes it's like, yeah, the business has grown, and now there's systems everywhere, there's data everywhere, and how do you bring it together into a format where it makes sense, but it's also at the appropriate level. It's a high enough level. It's not like there's a level of granularity that is actually can get in front of making proper decisions, because it's like, no, it's irrelevant. So how do you sort of balance that out and say we got to hit the right level of data, the right it's got to be consistent, it's got to be accurate, but we're $100 million business. We're not worried about $1.98 in in a transaction somewhere. Like how do businesses sort of reconcile like getting the right data to the right people at the right time in the right amount, I guess.
Yeah, so that's a whole that's a data management, data governance kind of a domain, whereby you would have, if you have the right infrastructure in place and the right protocols and governance systems, then you can easily roll that up or go down to lower level details depending on the different types of users across the organization. The key here is making sure that, one, you have that sort of single source of truth across the organization. And if it's a global organization, then you make sure you're running a good ERP system, for example, that integrates the different the accounting practices that may vary across regions. So once you have a unified kind of a tool, because oftentimes we see one in a single organization in one country, they'd be using one ERP, and then in a different region they might be using another ERP. Now they don't necessarily talk to each other, so when you're compiling data from these two sources, you're bringing in an element of risk and um, potentially errors that could occur, especially in terms of growth, and further complexities. So just making sure you have the right ERP would go a long way in terms of just making sure your finance and accounting data is accurate. You're getting you can convert currencies, you can take into account taxes and all of that, and you get to see the real numbers that you want to make decisions off of.
So where do you see like where do you see, cuz I know you kind of mentioned like four different almost like phases of data readiness, right? um let's how does a company recognize where they're at of the four? Like, let's actually walk through a little bit of the four and just a high level overview, so that if you're listening, you can kind of go, oh, shoot, I thought we were closer to four, but we're
Yeah,
barely
yeah.
over two.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, well, the easy answer is, no matter which CFO or CTO you are, you can quite often, a good a s- a- the simple answer is that your organization is likely lagging behind its data maturity curve relative to its growth stage, that it's at a particular point in time. And there's a reason for that. Organizations, as they grow, they don't necessarily come to realize the data pains that its organization users are experiencing. These are like these subtle, persistent pains that sort of linger in the back, and they sort of compound, not necessarily over time, but certainly over a company's growth. So they often get ignored, and people find ways and means to patch them here and there, and sort of move on and accept a status quo, and move on with the day-to-day stuff. But they don't realize, or decision makers or senior executives, they wouldn't realize how much of a productivity impact that is having across the organization, because these people are doing repeated mundane sort of tasks, and they which could easily be fixed, provided they had the right systems in place or the right technologies, and good data governance and data strategy. So that's a starting point. Just know, you can be rest assured that you're first, lagging behind. Um,
Yeah.
as for your other comment about, the more important, sort of signals that could tell you where you fit, in terms of the different phases of data maturity. I touched briefly already on data aware, where these are like disparate systems, silos, non-standardized reports. Um, the next step is data proficiency, and that's where, an organization may have, a nice little BI tool, which is, pulling in data from these different sources, and providing an sort of a KPI tracking, um, view, which are still standardized kind of reporting, for consumption of its
Mhm.
users. The problem with that is, that once you have, an organization grows to, multi-million dollar, or hundreds of millions, where you have large number of users, again, geographic expansion, expanding, SKUs, now integrating, this data from all these different sources no longer becomes that straightforward. So you would then need to consider, hey, perhaps, I need something more streamlined. Similarly, again, you could have single source of truth issues where people may be, running off doing their own things in Excel, which quite often you've also come across.
Yeah.
So, and then the problem with that is they're not easily shared or up to date or consistent across an organization, or even within a single department. Within a finance team, for
Mhm.
example, you may have different versions. So, and then the dashboarding hell, obviously, where people are, every little group or, business unit is spinning up its own dashboard, and then it's giving you different stories, um,
Mhm.
every time. So that's a signal where you need to think about, okay, how can I have, a sort of well-oiled machine that sort of addresses all these pain points, but also preps me for the next big thing, which then, as you can guess, is AI, machine learning, all that cool stuff. That would
Mhm.
be then. So once an organization has done that, they're now ready to make data informed, critical business decisions. So now we can call them, as data savvy. They still
Mhm.
haven't reached the peak, but they're still, at least the critical business decisions are now being data backed. There is, ability to deploy citizen data scientists or data analysts and whatnot, and then it's a strong decision support system in place that can be used to make smarter business decisions, and hopefully, gain competitive advantage. Being data driven is somewhat of a lesser leap from being data savvy, as opposed to the leap that's required from proficiency to savviness. um, Being data driven essentially would then mean that you would, the data is like core part of the business, psyche, business, decision making, and you're deploying and using, advanced AI tools, to do optimizations at micro level across the organization. So, these are things that you could not easily identify just through human interaction or human analysis, but you would use tools like machine learning and AI, to find these opportunities where you could cut costs or improve revenue.
I want to actually hit on one little sort of point there or phrase you said, like at the micro level. So that is, I guess, where um, AI would probably is that the best time for it to be introduced, or is that maybe like one of its like superpowers? Is at that micro level, person
Yeah.
to person, department to department, all those little repetitive tasks and things. Is that the place to start?
Not necessarily. So that's a great question, by the way. I think the the most exciting bit here, in based on the recent growth in technology that we've seen, especially for example from, let's say, we are Microsoft Shop, so we 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 are constantly looking out for what sort of tools are coming up, and with Copilot, for example, it's a the sort of it the capabilities that it offers are enormous in terms of small productivity gains. So what previously was something that only large enterprise level organizations could deploy just because of sheer cost and volume, both of technology as well as the required resources. Now it has become so much easier to adopt some of these developments in AI at a much earlier phase, just to boost productivity. So, for example, an organization that is data proficient or data savvy may have, let's say, a Business Central, which is a Dynamics ERP deployed, um, that can then be upgraded, let's say, with Copilot, and now you have AI ready to go, and you can run with it and make your jobs easier in terms of how you use that data that's residing in your ERP, to make smarter finance or business decisions.
Obviously, like you're mentioning ERP. I know that's where you guys are experts, but also the organizations you're talking about, there probably isn't any other system that can like that's really what an ERP is built for, isn't
Yeah.
it? To take control of all this data, standardize it, and get those processes in place across an entire organization, kind of no matter how big and how diverse.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not again. So let's say if we step away from ERP space a little bit, right? So let's think about business users now. Everybody, well, like most users are now, especially in business settings, they're using Microsoft Office, right? So they're using Excel, PowerPoint, Word, all these kind of applications.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often, companies also have SharePoint sites. For email, they're using, let's say, Outlook. For communication, they're using Teams. Now, again, there are AI tools that can be deployed to boost productivity across all these applications. In fact, we have hosted a few webinars this year that we can plug those in towards the end of this conversation. But you could people can go check out those webinars on our website, and we showcase certain examples of how with each of these applications you can use generative AI, for example, to simply give commands, and the software does everything, or the agent does everything for you. So um, the sort of productivity benefit is it's just kind of exponential. The sort of time that you would
Mm-hmm.
invest previously doing certain tasks, you can get done in seconds.
And I imagine done in seconds, but probably also cuts down on errors like sort of data entry errors and everything else that can
Yep, for sure.
cause all kinds of issues all the way up, I'm guessing.
For sure.
So if you're the CFO and you're going, okay, yeah, we might be lagging a little behind than the further than I thought. Um, no matter where they are in those 4 step process, they're probably most aren't on step 4. Where like what do they do to say like I know I need this, I know I need the data. We want to be able to put AI to use. We know we've got to take control of some things first. Where do they even start? Like how do they? What's the first step that they should be taking?
Well, the first thing that they should do is don't end up in what I call AI hell. just like the dashboarding hell that ISP previously mentioned about. So, um, and this is something that you will see more and more in the coming months and years, I guess, as you get these sort of use case specific cool AI tools, right? So these days I go to these meetings and quite often you have like these note taker AI apps joining the call that sort of record
Mhm.
your apps and, sort of you record your conversation and give you a summary, which is cool. The problem is that these if you go back and if you start deploying these kind of tools for specific use cases, essentially it's just going to be very difficult to manage, and again difficult to integrate to get a better sense of productivity growth across the organization. So um, if CFOs are looking for quick wins and they say, let's say, regardless of the stage that they're in terms of their data maturity, they want to deploy something that's going to give them instant returns. Productivity is a good place to start, right? Day-to-day productivity, um, they'll give you instant ROI. The adoption is easy and affordable, and with the right tool, you can scale. So, for example, let's say
Mhm.
if you had this note taker app that you've subscribed to, it's serving your purpose for that little thing. But what about
Mhm.
all the other related conversations that you're having on this topic within your team, over, let's say, a Teams channel or over emails, or if there are any proposals written in Word that are lying around in your SharePoint site, or any decks that people have developed. So how do you use one tool that can integrate data from all these different sources and give you a much better kind of outline, actionable next steps, um, and a more holistic view of the problem and the solution? So that's just one example, right? So think of, let's say, if you have a Copilot deployed for Microsoft stack of products that is going through your team's channel communications, that's looking at your emails and Outlook on related content, that's looking at any past work that's been done for other clients, similar clients in the past. So all that information can then be utilized um, and synthesized um, for the problems at hand today.
I know there's a question here, and I don't know if this is sort of an area of expertise, but I know listening, and I'm sure people are thinking the same thing. So um, there's got to be some hesitation in implementing something like this when it's going like, okay, it sounds great in theory. What kind of security risks are there? What kind of risks and because now we're talking, oh, now it's into email and it's into everything else. Is there like, how do you set up your organization right to be able to say like, yeah, this is going to be really useful for our team, but it's not going to end up on, someone typing into chat gpt and it pulls up your art. I know that doesn't happen, but you know what I'm saying? Like somehow something becomes public that probably should be proprietary to your business.
Yeah. And that's a risk that you take also with these sort of oftentimes these free applications, right? Because nothing is free at the end of the day. Even if you're using that service, that data is no longer in your control. So if you're doing that
Mhm.
if you're using those tools for critical research that you don't necessarily want to be exposed, then you just don't you shouldn't be using them, So um,
Yeah.
the benefit of looking at established vendors is that, so for example, when we're working with Microsoft tech stack, these are the data is residing in, let's say, Microsoft Azure cloud. There are strict compliance standards that that are applicable depending on what region you're in, and the requirements and the regulations that exist. So, and then there is also backup and security measures that are also in place. So, arguably, cloud is oftentimes, especially with all the advancements, is often more secure as opposed to, let's say, an on-prem kind of a model, where you are totally dependent on your own for data security.
I remember talking with a business owner one time that was talking about uh well, this is, going back a couple of years, but he was talking about the still the fear of the cloud, and I was my answer was kind of like, well, who has better security, the front door of your office or Microsoft?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
like, it's a different sort of thing, right? So, I think that's people are gaining trust faster and faster, and in the cloud. But it's like it's the next thing right over the horizon is now I have to gain trust in AI, and it feels to me, or it sounds to me, the way you're talking is that it needs to be part of the holistic approach. It's not necessarily like you said, don't just bolt on a free tool because you've just put in this amazing system in place and you've got your data really solid. Um, I'm guessing that as you roll out these AI efficiency tools and things, there should be a plan in place and a way to vet it as well. I'm guessing to make sure that you're actually bringing in the right tools into the ecosystem.
Yeah, and oftentimes, like there was a cool demonstration of Copilot, for example, where there was a bot that was, let's say, a person that was created, um, and that sort of bot per slash person ran the entire webinar on their own, for example. So these things sort of like they all look cool, feel cool, but you're like people are wondering, asking, hey, okay, how does this benefit my organization? So then you have to really think about the use cases and get people on board in terms of, okay, what are the actual pain points that they have that can be fixed using these tools. So, for
Mhm.
example, let's say for marketing teams, you are looking at new creative ways of gaining outreach, right? So, a really cool application of, let's say, this Copilot um, AI agent that Microsoft is now offering is that let's say you have a bunch of content on a certain topic laying around in the form of a PDF or a book or whatever it may be, and
Mhm.
you wanna let's say convert it into a podcast. So all you gotta do is say, hey, take this document and give me a 10-minute podcast or convert it into a 10-minute podcast. So now what it's
Yeah.
going to do is is going to go through that document and generate a 10-minute podcast, which you can upload on your whatever company site. And there you go. Now you have a new way of new channel through which you can reach your customers or spread your message. And all you had to do was basically just issue that command. So
Yeah.
with literally no effort, now you can convert your past wealth of information that the organization has accrued over time, can then be used in creative ways to grow their business.
Yeah, and I imagine like that with a large organization and a massive library of data, it's just not even feasible really for people to take runs at little tiny bits here and there.
Yeah,
But I imagine what AI can do is look at the overall
yeah,
bulk of this information.
yeah. So you could have, like a SharePoint site, for example, where you have documents from across the organization, right? All kinds of different teams. So, yes, they should be organized in certain ways, but let's say even if it's not, you could just do a whole scan, and the bots will learn or extract useful content from that repository and then give you some interesting sort of summarization. So that
Mhm.
can be used for in various creative ways.
So this has been really interesting because we basically started with okay, here's the problem that you could have in your organization, and but what I really like is that we started to paint the picture of where it can get to, and now you can how you can start to harness AI from an efficiency level and making use of this content talking with your customers and informing your customers and all this amazing stuff that you can do. Um, but I know there's a bunch of people that'll be going, yeah, we were back in the first part here. So what are those first steps? If I'm CFO of an organization, I'm like, yeah, we want to get there. I know we have to get there. Where should they start? Who should they talk to? How do they get started with someone like you to say, okay, here's how we actually take that first step?
Um, oh, it's simple. Just call me, and we'll 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 solve the problem. No, I mean it's well, it's a standard process in the sense that if people reach out to us, the first stage is discovery, right? So trying to understand what type of business they're in, what are where they're at right now in terms of data maturity, what their growth trajectory is going to look like, or what they're forecasting, um, and what are the key areas where they can, they feel like they can gain from these new technologies and tools. So um, once we identify or map their problems, then we can then start going into solutioning and figuring out
Mm.
what works for them best. There's one of the benefits of being a Microsoft shop is that there's no just one system that we push to customers, right? So there is, even within an ERP space, for example, there are different flavors of ERP depending on organization size, the nature of the business. So we look at all of that and then come up with ways, okay, depending on their budgets, depending on their business type, what would be most feasible for them.
Let someone wants to call you. How should they get hold of you?
Yeah.
And we will have some of it in the show notes. But if they're listening, they're on the phone. How should they get hold of you and find you?
They can go to our website or find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. They can look me up by name. The company name is Enovate. So Enovate has that sort of AI in it in the end. So it's spelled as Enovait. And go to enovate.io, and reach us out from there.
Yeah, and like I said, I'll also add that into the show notes. But this was a really great conversation, Usman. Like I really enjoyed it. I'm sure there's a lot of other topics we may dive into in the future because I know even just chatting the other day, there's several that came to the surface really quick because
Yeah.
this feels like another sort of time of massive transition for business. Maybe almost on the scale of moving to the internet, moving online, moving to the cloud. This is another big transition that businesses are going through, and I know people are starving for information and help to do that. So yeah, any of you guys out there, definitely look up Uzma, go check out innovate.io and chat with him, and he'll get you straightened out and moving your business forward. Thank you for joining us today. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes. And if you're part of the office of a CFO or you are a CFO, please come and talk with us. If you guys are buried in spreadsheets for your cash flow forecasting, we can help you save hours every single week and give you something that you can deliver to the management team that is crystal clear and accurate.